I'm Saif Ali, and I'm a refugee from Iraq. I'm here with you today to share the story of how my 18-year journey of seeking asylum has helped me uncover hidden gifts in displacement. Many of us have learned something about the adversity that refugees and asylum seekers go through, from experiencing wars to violation of human rights to natural and man-made disasters. They are forced to embrace journeys of uncertainty, ending up with living an uprooted life in limbo lands around the world. With that in mind, I'll invite you to think and feel what it feels being in that place. Take a few seconds and put yourself in that place. And I'll ask you a question. What are the first thoughts that come to your mind when you think of a refugee or an asylum seeker? Pick up 3 thoughts. Have you all done that? Now I'd like you to put them on the side for a minute. And now I'll tell you my story. I was born in September 1980 in a city called Basra in Iraq. At the same week when the war between Iraq and Iran started. For any Iraqi family, this was a horrific news. For our family, it was a terrifying experience. My father was the cousin of the leader of the opposition party to Saddam. And knowing the dictator Saddam was, this made the family the most celebrated in the eyes of the government. But in a different way. 128 members of the family got murdered, and the lucky ones got tortured, jailed, and kicked out of their jobs and homes. We had to flee Iraq. Luckily, my father was a chief engineer on commercial ships, and him and the captain, they are allowed to take on their families with them. So we decided to travel the world for 8 years while the war was happening. From that moment onwards, those ships became home for me. That's where I learned how to take my first steps. That's where I learned how to say my first words. This is where I studied and at times played in the engine. We continued traveling like gypsies and visited many countries. And I remember taking my first keyring from Japan, buying my first wallet from Yemen, and having my first kiss on the sunny beaches of Rio de Janeiro. But life wasn't that sweet. Underneath that, I was a very uprooted, little disturbed boy. In 1989, the war finished, and we decided to go back to Iraq and settle down. 1 year later, the war kicked off again. This time I wasn't on a floating ship, I was on a solid land, experiencing war for the first time, a little 9-year-old boy running through burning doors, walking beside dead bodies, and I will never forget the smell of their burning flesh. We continued living in Iraq until 1997. I was 17 years old. Life became unsafe for us, so we had to flee again, this time for good. We went to Jordan. The culture was very similar to the culture I came from, so it wasn't very difficult to integrate. We picked up the accent. Nobody knew that we were from Iraq. And by the way, I'm the one with the hair. I had hair back then. I was enjoying it. I went to university. My sister and brother went to school. And life started to take a different turn for us. There was a lot of uncertainty in there because we never knew if we would be able to stay in Jordan or be sent back to Iraq. So we could never plan our future. But parallel to that, there was a tiny life emerging until one day. I felt comfortable to tell my friends about my story and my journey in Iraq. And those beautiful laughters that we had and the beautiful conversations that we shared, they were replaced with awkward silences. And at times, some empathy that was very relevant, but at other times, it was a demoralizing sympathy. inappropriate questions, very harsh comments. They couldn't see all of who I am, and they boxed me in a tiny little box. They couldn't see through me. They couldn't see through the experience that tainted their vision. All what they could see, a victim. Being the fragile teenager I was at that time, I couldn't hold it together. And in a way, I took that in. And I believe that this is my identity. My story was my identity. The loss, the suffering, all what I experienced, that was my identity. So I felt that I was less than a human, and my dreams were less than a dream. We continued living in Jordan for 11 years. And by the end of that, I learned that I can no longer stay in Jordan because my asylum claim was refused. That means I will be sent back to Iraq. And knowing that it was unsafe for me, I had to flee again. But this time on my own. I applied for a visa to the UK, and I booked my flight, and I said goodbye to my family. In the UK, asylum seekers wait between 6 months to 20 years waiting for asylum claim to be processed. That doesn't guarantee that they will get the refugee status by the end. During that time, they are not allowed to get employment. They don't know it's legal to volunteer. They share houses with other asylum seekers with very poor conditions, surviving on £5 a day, if they were lucky. The unlucky ones will be living on the street or couch surfing, surviving on nothing. I was placed in a house in the north of England, one of the most multicultural towns in England, called Wigan. Go into that house, and I met my housemates. There were 3. One has been waiting in the system for 3 years, and the other one for 6, and the third one was waiting for 11 years. And I just missed the 4th person because he got deported. And in a way, I knew what was waiting for me. They were similar age to mine. I was 27. But they looked 100 years older. I could see a glimpse of my future on their haggard faces and the dull reflection of their soulless eyes. I spent the first year with utter anxiety, depression, and worry that one day I will receive that letter saying, Saif, you're going to be sent back. And I did receive that letter. In January 2008, I got the refusal letter, and I was evicted from the house. Sitting outside with my backpack, not knowing where to go, what to do. Looking back at my past, and I could see no glimpse of meaning. Looking ahead, and I could see no hope or no purpose. Looking inside, and there was nothing but an eerie void. I felt that there is no point of me staying alive again. What's there to stay for? I never felt less hopeful. I never felt more empty. At that moment of utter emptiness around me and inside me came a very faint voice, but very reassuring, saying, Saif, this is what you've got right now. You can spend the rest of your life, no matter how short or how long it is, blaming God, blaming circumstances, wondering about the justice of life, or you can live it differently. And at that moment, that felt to me that as an invitation to see something beyond that suffering, because that wasn't my entire story. And I had to re-author my story beyond what I've lost. I didn't know where to start from. My priority at that time is to find a temporary place where I could stay, and I found it after a few days. And during that time, I had a nagging voice saying, pick up the camera. Pick up the camera. I'm like you wondering, what does that mean? I took the camera that I had, and I went out in the street, taking photographs for all what my heart was drawn to. And with the first click, something clicked in me. It felt to me that I was experiencing life for the very first time, like a little boy, just connecting with the different aspects of life. Because I haven't had any inside. And it felt to me that I was drinking life from these pictures and watering something that was just coming alive very, very slowly. One drop at a time, one picture at a time. Shortly after that, those pictures felt too still for me, and I started to crave a more animated version of life. So I started learning about filming. I joined groups where I learned about filming, and I joined courses. And I remember fasting for days and days just to save the little money to go and travel to those places where I can learn. Life started to grow a little bit bigger. And finally, I felt that something in me started to come alive. I started connecting with people, connecting with stories, but from behind the camera. I wasn't confident enough to experience it firsthand. But gradually after that, I felt more confident. And for some reason, that empty place gave birth to a version of me that I've never felt before. Something that was more authentic to me, something that I've never met before. There's a little meaning started to come alive, and that's the point when my journey shifted from seeking asylum to seeking purpose. I moved from behind the camera and I stepped to be part of the crowd. And life felt very, very different. I was still facing the adversity of homelessness, of hunger, of uncertainty, but there was something else with it. The meaning was the glue that kept me all together. Until one day, I decided to come out with my story to a group of people that I was volunteering with. And the exact same thing that happened to me in Jordan happened here too. They couldn't see me through a wide-angle lens. They crushed my bones through a tiny pinhole. I was reduced, I was abused, and I was victimized. The difference this time, I was stronger. I had more sense of self. I picked up myself again. And at that time, I had no one passion to pursue, but I had an authentic curiosity that was leading me through it. It was the compass for me to go through life and just search for my purpose. So I continued studying, and I went and I studied about personal growth. And I learned there that in psychology, that displacement means the realignment of one state of being into another. And that's when my purpose came into focus. And one day in 2015, on the way back from London, with my coach training certificate in my hand, thinking, it's been 18 years, and there's no one route shooting off my feet. I'm still seeking asylum, and I'm exhausted inside. And a parallel thought to that, I thought, I'll bring back that voice that said, no matter how short or long your life is, you can still make it count. And I decided to work with refugees and asylum seekers and bring my learning to help them re-author their story, to think beyond the displacement and try to see who can they become beyond it. At that very moment, a call from the Home Office came saying, Saif Ali, you've got a refugee status. Everything made sense at that time. Looking back, I connect all the dots. That's how I found Integr8 UK, helping refugees and asylum seekers lead a purposeful life beyond displacement, beyond pain, loss, and lack. They attend a self-discovery and personal empowerment program. Following to that, there's an integration and mentoring program where they start going to the community and bring forward the gifts they are born to share in the world. This is a picture from the first program I ran. In this picture, there are 9 refugees and asylum seekers. I invite you to look at them, and look at them closely. And now, bring back the 3 words that you chose at the beginning. If your words only reflected their experience of loss, suffering, adversity, pain, I'd like you to widen your view. I'd like you to change your lens. A refugee is not an identity. It's a life experience. Loss, grief, pain, they are not an identity. They are a life experience. Each time we define people by what they lack, we deprive them from who can they become beyond it. We steal meaning from their life. We steal meaning from life itself. If we invest more time empowering people and cultivating in their gifts as much as we spend time with addressing their suffering, even the most harrowing experiences can be a birthplace for meaning, purpose, and authenticity. I'm Saif Ali. I'm a refugee from Iraq. I'm also a passionate artist, a filmmaker, a photographer, a designer, an engineer, a coach, and a social entrepreneur. Thank you for listening.